Hi guys, welcome back to Deliver Studios. We are studying on user authentication using the Slim framework, and we'll be consuming the API with Retrofit in Android application. This is the advanced REST client interface. We have a working API when we're trying to log in to the user using a password by here at Gmail, and we have a response 200 OK with the ID, the name, the username, and the API key assigned to this particular user. So we have this working. We have the create user and the user login working perfectly. I will be heading straight to Android Studio where we'll be passing these parameters and we'll be consuming that. We'll be creating a UI interface that will enable us to register the form and also log in into the application. Right then, Android Studio, we start from the dependencies as we've all been doing. You'll be needing some major dependencies. Retrofit is the way to go when it comes to network libraries or network interaction, trying to fetch JSON, trying to post data, trying to put, trying to get, trying to delete, and doing all verbs when it comes to HTTP connection. Retrofit very important, the version 2, and we have the converter that will convert to JSON, where you get to use the POJO, the plain object Java, to interact with the queries. So you get to use the JSON, and you could also add the square up OK HTTP, which is a login interceptor that will get to give you logs of the present situation of your calls, your post, the parameters sent, and the successful response, and also the JSON body sent. So you could actually get a first hand on what's happening or when you're actually making a network call to your API. We'll be adding that, and you have the card view, the support design all set. You seek Gradle at this point in time. From here, we head down to the layout files. In any Android application comes with a useful or an intuitive UI. So with that, you could code up the Java classes or the Kotlin version if you really desire. We have the login, which is going to be the launcher of this application, just a basic login screen, the username password with a button to log in, which is going to trigger the action to log in, and a text field depicting no account yet, create one if you haven't, or if you are launching the application for the first time, you don't have an account. So that will direct you to create a new account. So that's that for the screen. We're using the nested scroll view. If it's getting lengthy, probably it's more than a screen, so it's quite good to do that. If you this will target any screen sizes, probably small or large, so you will have some aspect of the UI cropped off. And the way to go is to use the app compact image view. You could use the text input layout. These are all from the support design library, the material designs. The text input edit text from the support design as well, not the plain text input edit text. We know this as int. It has the sticker at the top. You could do some funky things with the field. So we're actually relying on that. And the app compact button. This is a material design form. Cool. Let's head straight to other layouts that we'll be looking at. We have the register, just a kind of replica of the login, but with more fields. When we have the name, email, username, password, and the register button. So also following through the nested scroll view, the app compact, the text input layout, and the app compact support design text input edits text. Afterwards, you could have your dashboard, which is just going to show the successful login, or a screen which is can be your main activity. That's just going to show the username and the name of the logged in user. So we could identify the user that actually logged in into the application. So after this, I head straight down to the implementation, which is the logic, the Java classes, and I'll walk you through on how it's actually structured. From the tree, as you could see, the packages authentication, we have some packages, helper, model, networking, and utilities, which is going to help us to do something. This is where you have your preference utils to save to shared preferences and constants. Let's just look at the preference utils. You save name, you save email, and you save the username, all to shared preferences. So it's advisable to have a separate class to handle all preference related work. So it's actually going to save it for you, and you have that well structured. And the constants class follows. These are not changing, or even if they are changing, they are useful across the board. So it's an interface, so you don't need to instantiate. That's the essence of an interface. You have the authorization, the base URL, the keys, and the keys that you used. So it's very, very recommended to save that in a constant. So you have that set up right there. You have the helper method, which is going to help you for validation. Validating the form, we have the input validation that actually checks if the input edit text is filled. It's going to take the value, check if it's empty, as you can see in the method right there. It's going to hide the keyboard from the text input edit text. If it is not empty, it's going to throw an error that you actually need to fill the field. It's also going to check for email if it's matching the email address pattern. You could use regular expression, but you have this out of the box. You have a pattern from Android tips, which is actually going to check the pattern of the email if it's corresponding to the format that it's actually looking at for. Cool. You have the text matches. That if the password is not matching each other, because you're going to have a password and a confirmed password, so it's going to check if they're actually matching before it's going to register you into the system. That's cool. We have that for validation. Let's get to look at our model. Our model is going to be simple, where we have the message, which is actually listening to the response of message if you register successfully or not. And you have the login, because we're going to return some parameters of the user. We're going to return the ID, the name, the username, the email of the user, and the API key on a successful login. So you have the POJO to undo that. It's going to actually undo its serialized name. It's going to undo those fields. Now, full focus should go to the networking, where we're going to interact with Retrofit and get the base URL, the endpoints fused together. You have sub packages in the networking folder, where you have the API and the generator, and you have a route interface. This is actually going to be the endpoint. You have the base URL, which is right in the constant, and you have the endpoint here to create a user and to log in the user, create user and user login. It should follow the URL, as you could see in the PHP code. If you should notice, to create a user, you have to point to HTTP localhost users version 1 and create user. And there's something I will want to show us, how to actually get the IP, because we are actually doing this locally, and you will need an IP address. For people that will want to use XAMPP, you don't have to use the live server to get this done. So I'm actually going to copy this shorthand code, which we're going to run in the terminal to get the IP of this particular machine. Let's get to call the terminal, and I want to get the IP, so that's going to be the pointer. You can't use localhost, and you're going to be testing using the emulator. The device is not actually going to see that because it's just locally based on your machine. So let me get that. Let's check what the IP is going to be. So this is just it. If you're running Mac, if you're running Linux, and also Windows, you could actually try this out. If config the grep, and it's actually going to speed out your IP address. You could see the first one is what you should put focus on, 172.17.0.1. That's the IP of this machine. So with that, that's what we're going to be linking with. You could see where I'm going to actually get that specified. It's going to be in the constant as you've seen. Let's get to look at the constant one more time. It's use constant. You could see the IP now. So with these, you should be able to interact with your XAMPP, with your WAMP, get your IP, and you're gonna pass that this way. So you could actually develop locally and use Android and interact with it like a network interaction, which is all sitting right there on your machine. So that's just how to go. We should continue from where we start. We talk about the login, we talk about the routes, and now we're going to talk about the generator. Uh, these are just naming conventions. You could name them anything you feel like. This is just a boilerplate that takes the service class, the context, and the base URL if you have. It's going to actually check for backward slash and make the URL quite useful, not a malformed URL. And you have the JSON builder where you get to serialize if it's null, pass some parameters there, set the date format to long, you set the pretty to printing, which is the JSON is going to be in pretty format, and also you could set the version of your JSON right there. You could start up with retrofit builder. This way to get the HTTP timeout connection, the connect timeout, the read timeout, the write timeout. You could add, if you know you are dealing with a low network, you could add a larger time out interval. But if you know you're actually in a fast network, you could go ahead to get that lead to. So that's it. And the configuration, the debug, you could intercept every call, so that this is whether the bug works. You need to actually specify this as well to add to the interceptor, where it's going to actually log to the console, to the Android monitor, or to the lockout, the process whereby you are interacting with the API. It's going to You're going to see all the logs. That's what that's, and you'll be ready to build the retrofit. This is done in the data service generator. Now in the API, you could intercept if you want to intercept and pass in an API key, and if you just want to do a plain call, it's advisable to use API key when you're dealing with probably production application where you don't want people to start calling the APIs unnecessary, and you need to create an interceptor to intercept the API and pass in the API key as in the header. For us, we won't be going deeper into that. You stick with the service. This is also an interface. This is where you specify the different verbs that you're interacting with the API: the post, the put, the get, the delete, and some other, the patch, and some other verbs. Now we're going to create the user. That's why you have the post, and you have the annotation, the at form URL encoded. You have to encode the URL because it's coming up in a form look and feel. And what you're gonna do, you call the, the retrofit call. You pass in the generic class, which is the response that will be expecting the results from this call. You create a method for that, create user, and you pass in the fields because it's actually coming in the form. We have different ways you could actually pass data to your API. It could be in form URL encoded. It could be in objects. It depends on how you really design your API. But this is actually listening to forms because it's going to be reusable to probably just basic form where you just need to input data in the web. We have the fields, the name, the username, the password. Those are the fields that you'll be using. The same thing applicable to the login. It's actually expecting the user login class as the response. It's taking the username, password, all in post request. So you have that specified in the service. So let's get to see how we're going to interact with the interface, the user service. We're going to do that firstly from the register. Let's get to look at the register because we will register before we get to login. Definitely. You extend app compact, implement the view on click listener so that you could override the on click method, and you point to different IDs that you actually tie in your click listener to. That's what that's going to do. You have different views that you're going to initialize: the text input layout, the text input edit text. These are all from the support designs. The app compact button, even the input validation with the progress dialog. This progress dialog is just going to be an intermediary between the point of making the request and the point of getting the response, so that you could have a dialog screen showing up there. You create the onCreate method to set the layout, and now we're going to initialize four methods. The init views, this is when you instantiate or you initialize the views, let's put it that way, the views which were you created earlier. And the listeners, you're going to listen to click listener to the register and to the text view to actually get you logged in. These are the two listeners that you could listen to. And the validation, you need to instantiate right there the input validation, so that you're going to have an object to interact with those methods in the class. In the onClick method, which you've written from the view onClick listener, we have some IDs that you need to point out: the button register and the login if you have it. Let's get to verify some data. This is where we call the input validation. To take those values that we're actually looking at, it's going to take the input edit text, that's to text if the edit text is filled or not. The same thing goes for the email, that's for the name and email. The same thing goes for the username. If it's not filled, it's going to return a response, an error response. And this is if the email is a valid that matches the pattern, the Android util pattern, email pattern. And it's going to actually text for the password as well if it's filled, and it's going to check if the passwords, the two passwords you're passing in, actually matches each other. If all these stumbling blocks are actually crossed out, it's going to move further to extract the values from the username, from the name, and from the password, and pass it out to a method called submit user details that listen to three parameters or string data type. So you have it right there. You show the dialog first because now you want to interact with the network. Despite if you are doing that locally, or it could be the API could be in the cloud. Now you call the login service. You should be familiar with Retrofit at this point in time. You create a call from that, and you create a user. This is a method that sits right there in the interface you've been coming from. You pass in those three parameters, since you're actually going to get that triggered from this other method, which is the verify data. Now you call and queue and instantiate the callback, where you're going to override two methods: on response and on failure. On response, that's where you get to extract the data. This is where you interact with the UI. It's no more in the background. It's now running on the main thread. So that's where you get to quickly bind data, get to extract the values you need, pass it to different intents, anything you wish to do with the data returned. Now the data returned is just going to be a successful message, which you have it right there, and you have a toast to tell the user that you've successfully registered right there. Now you need to let's get to open up this login. Since you register, the intent should just take you down to the login activity, so that you could be able to issue out your login into the application. So that's just it. And we have the empty input edit text unsuccessful. Just clear it out and let's have a fresh form. The initialize dialog, that's the progress dialog. You instantiate it, you set the message, you set cancelable. You could set cancelable to be false, so it's not going to cancel until the process finishes. You show the dialog, or you could hide the dialog using the p dialog show, the dialog show, or the dialog dismiss. So that's for the register. Let's get to look at the login. The login too should follow the same flow. Extend app compact, implement view on click listener, create a fields that we will actually send right there. But now we're going to have few fields. We're just going to have username and password, and you're also going to have the onCreate method instantiates the views, the listeners, the objects, and the dialog. The views is when you initialize the views created. The listener is when you set click listener to the different button or point of target, which is the button to get you logged in, and the point button or the text to get you registered, which creates an intent to the register activity. You instantiate the object, the validation, to have a valid object of the input validation class. You have the on-click method now, you have the button login and the register. In the button login, it verifies the data. From there, it passes the data down to the API, and to register is going to push an intent down to the register activity. The verified data, this is where you use the validation to check if the text is filled. That's for the username and the password. If they are all filled, it's going to actually extract it, get the text to string, trim it up, pass that to a variable, and also call a method called login, which takes two parameters, email and password, all string data type. So that's where we get now to interact with the API again. We're going to use the same process now. This time we're calling the user login. You also instantiate the callback. You have the response and the failure on response. If it's successful or not, you get to interact with the UI. And now we need a response, which is the response body. You see it right there, which is a message. Now with this object, you could interact with the POJO with the get name, the set name, or we only have get and set anyway. So you have the get name to extract the name from the body, extract the email, the username, and even the error message. So it's going to pass all that to a variable. Now you're going to be using those variables. If the boolean false, that is, if the error message says it's false, it's going to save some values to the shared preference, because you're going to use this on login, because these are the values that you use when you're trying to access the application after a successful login. So it's not going to keep on taking you back to this page all over again since you've logged in into the application. So that's just it. You have this save name, email and username, or to share preference, and you create an intent to instantiate that to call the dashboard activity. Else, that means an invalid username or password is being passed or is being used. So that definitely, that's why it's bringing out an error message of true, a boolean true. So you have that. You could hide the dialog when there's a problem to actually show the toast. So it's just not going to keep on showing the dialog indeterminately. You have that set up, so that's just for the login. And now let's get to look at the dashboard that we are all pointing at. The dashboard extends our properties, you all know, and now we just have two text views there: the username and the individual name and the password, and the username rather. So you just want to be sure that what we are passing from the login is really valid. So with the preferences that we have, we've actually saved that to the preferences. You could access it anywhere in the application. So far, you've now reset the preference to an empty or to a null value. So that's just it. And now if the username is not equals to null or the username is empty, it's going to actually spit out those values and set it to the view. So that ends the simple basic way to interact with an API to get yourself registered and log in into an application. We should even continue further to create a persistent login so that the user won't get to find himself or herself all the time accessing the application after logging and getting himself or herself stuck with the login process. So we'll get to look at that in the third part of this video. We should continue to extend more on this. We should keep doing a lot of things based on the user authentication module that we've actually opened up in the channel in the beginning of this particular series. So thank you very much for hanging out with me throughout this session. We hope you stick by to Delivery Studios. Don't go anywhere, and please strike on that button. Subscribe to my channel so you can have more of this to really learn and to really enjoy. And if you have any of the queries, or you really want me to shed more light on some other aspect of Android which I haven't, please leave a comment below, and feel free to interact with me anytime you feel like, to help you out in any of Android programming challenges. Thank you one more time. Have a wonderful time. Bye bye.